So some of my more hardcore viewers, you might remember my video on the Lifeboat Foundation, the nonprofit think tank that was dedicated to studying like malevolent AI, how to combat pandemics and viruses. They comprised of the world's like leading scientists and businessmen, and they'd get together and discuss the possibility of space colonies and underground bunkers. And the reason I brought them up is because Jeffrey Epstein was a part of that organization and even sat on their finance board. Well, believe it or not, this guy scored an interview with the president and CEO of the Lifeboat Foundation. Mind you, this was all over LinkedIn messaging, but I think it still counts as a win. So without further ado, let's dive into the messages. See how I geniusly sparked a conversation with this man. So again, Eric Klien's background is he is a leading cryonicist. He is a brilliant software developer. He actually made his fortune through buying and selling stocks. So the guy has a mind for numbers. And remember, Eric is a devout libertarian and someone who's into pushing the boundaries of science. So I started with, hey Eric, I'm a fellow libertarian and advocate for science, yet anti-religious science. You know what I mean. Basically, you seem to have ethical views, but a lot of people online are suspicious about Lifeboat due to Epstein's associations. Is there anything you can say to clear the air? Thank you. Eric replies, when he made the news, we reviewed our board members and found he was an inactive member on our board. He must have been accidentally added because of his association with other transhuman organizations. He was then deleted from our board, and he never either gave us money or was active on our board. I responded, hey Eric, thanks for the response. Well, I'd understand if Epstein was only listed on the Futurist board, which is pretty large, but he was also listed as being on the finance board, which appears to be a much smaller, more select group. How could someone be accidentally added into such a small/important board when they were never once active in the foundation? Hey Brett, he responds, our finance board is less important to Lifeboat than it looks. We are mostly focused on creating programs at lifeboat.com, programs which doesn't use that board. Best wishes, Eric Klien, where he gave me his voicemail, fax number, and Skype ID. Should probably ask him for a Skype interview. Eric, I respond, gotcha, that makes more sense then. Some people have speculated that Epstein possibly built an underground facility under his island. This is where I get conspiratorial on his ass. Due to it being on top of a hill, multiple doors leading into the hillside, ventilation shafts littered across the island, and his proclivity towards being secretive. Then people saw his association with the Lifeboat Foundation, which funds the construction of life shield bunkers. Has your organization constructed any bunkers yet, and do you think it's at all likely that Epstein would have had an underground bunker on his island/anywhere else, given what you know about bunker construction? I say, last question, yeah, right. I don't mean to bother you, thank you. Lifeboat Foundation has not constructed any bunkers. Epstein had enough money that he could have done so somewhere. In retrospect, instead of a bunker, what he needed was to be outside the United States due to his increasing legal problems. Thanks for entertaining my questions. My guess is his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, is outside the country for that very reason. I know that Elon Musk is also interested in a lot of what Lifeboat does, especially when it comes to mitigating the risks of AI. Do you have any ties to Musk? Unfortunately, we have never established contact with Elon Musk. He's a busy guy to say the least. Is Lifeboat doing anything to deal with the coronavirus? He sends me a link. I responded, stopping the infection needs to be taken seriously, but the way I see it, there's 9 billion people, 7 billion, whatever, on the planet, and 13,000 have died from corona. So far, it hasn't been nearly as deadly as the recent H1N1. Is shutting down the entire global economy really worth all this and what's more to come? He rephrases my question. Probably not. As more testing is brought online, it will be proven to be even less deadly than they think, and the mass quarantines will be phased out. They probably won't credit tests for causing this to happen. I think the death rate for the coronavirus is between 0.1% and 0.3%. The death rate keeps looking lower every time I look at it, so measures taken just don't match the threat. I had a great web designer developer job, but just got laid off the other day, and the agency doesn't look like it'll recover. Italy is overhyping their deaths by including anyone who has the coronavirus. So if you are run over by a truck and have the coronavirus, then they consider you a coronavirus death. Only 12% of the deaths they list are really the coronavirus. Anyway, virtually all governments screw this up the same way they will screw up existential risks and thereby cause our extinction. I agree with the point on governments. I showed someone who's really afraid of getting sick what you said, and I think you calmed them down a bit. LOL at the truck part. But where do you honestly think the virus came from? It came from China, obviously. They have a big population that interacts with a lot of wildlife. There's a chance that it leaked out of a bioweapons lab where they were doing the tests on it. So the last response that I've left things at is, yeah, there's a level 4 biosafety lab in Wuhan that was testing coronavirus on animals, so they seem to be a likely culprit. The motto of government seems to be, never let a good tragedy go to waste. So let's guard against more oppressive 9/11 legislation. The government is currently taking away internet privacy with the Earn It Act, and my guess is every flu season, they'll hold coronavirus over our heads to scare the population into more extreme, draconian measures. Now's the time to invest in the Life Shield bunkers and start an anarcho-commune. I jokingly ended it. So Eric Klien, a man who's dedicated his life basically to mitigating the risks of pandemics and malevolent AI, says that this is being overplayed by the government. Granted, he's a libertarian, and he does not much care for government, for good reasons, but he makes good points. If someone's death fits the scary coronavirus narrative, they will be added as a statistic. Whether or not they're 100% sure that they had the virus to begin with, or if they happen to die while having the virus for some other reason. So when I brought up in my correspondence with Eric Klien that we need to look out for 9/11 type legislation, I was specifically referring to the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act specifies that a person is able to be arrested and held without trial if they are accused of being a terrorist. And that is completely unconstitutional. Maybe I could have justified it during the limited time frame that we had post 9/11. The issue, however, was this was enacted by the Bush administration, and the Obama administration had the ability to throw it out the window because it was supposed to only be a temporary measure. That's what they said. Instead, Obama signed it back into existence for however many more years the Patriot Act is going to be in existence. So what I'm saying to look out for is, during this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of authoritative measures taken in order to protect the population. Fair enough for a temporary thing. What's going to happen is they're going to shift the Overton window further and further more into tyranny, which might sound like a hyperbolic word, but no, it is like the totalitarian tiptoe towards a somewhat Orwellian regime that we need to look out for. Because they're going to move the goalposts further and further and see what more they can get away with. It's the old metaphor of the frog in the boiling water, where you slowly turn up the heat more and more. Already, they're using this pandemic to pass something called the Earn It Act, which is ending end-to-end encryption, which basically means that we will no longer have any sort of privacy whatsoever online. Not that we had much to begin with. All right, now to really get my point across, let me read you some stats. So last year, 43 million people contracted the flu in the United States. 647,000 were hospitalized. 61,200 died from the flu. The stock market did not crash. There was no panic. The CDC, they also report that they estimate 40 to 70% of United States citizens are going to be infected with the coronavirus at some point. Let's see, the numbers as of today. What's today? March 27th. We got 539,000 cases worldwide. That's not even the United States. And about 22,000 deaths worldwide. Again, not even the United States. And we're almost at the end of flu season. What am I missing here? But enough with reading stats. Let's look at something fun. Here we have our favorite aging diva, Madonna, in her, what is this, 2000... I found this on 8kun. This is Madonna's 2019 depopulation-themed Eurovision performance. This is her wearing a crown, while her dancers wear gas masks and flower wreaths. This happened right before, like, the very first Corona case even came out. Of course, she's wearing the crown, and Corona means crown in Greek. We got the flower wreaths going, symbolic of the spring. Right now we're in the spring equinox. This is just what I'm reading off of 8kun. I don't necessarily agree with everything this person says, but it's just cool to look at. Let's see. He says wreaths are also a symbol of rebirth. New World Order reference. He says, I know the end of April is usually when mass ritual sacrifices are performed, like last year's Notre Dame burning and Sri Lanka massacre. What's going to happen in a month? Well, let's see. According to my knowledge of pagan religions, we have Beltane and Ostera that happen in the spring. And those are two major pagan holidays out of the 8 pagan holidays. And yes, they do have a history of performing sacrifices during those times. I just love stuff like this. Just like creepy coincidences where they have this performance here where, yeah, they're literally wearing gas masks. We have the crown. I know she's a queen. Yes, yeah, Queen Slay. But we got the one eye symbolism too with the eye patch. On a related note, I think that if you don't find it hilarious to talk about how celebrities are deteriorating from andrenochrome withdrawal right now, then you're totally dead inside. I mean, just look at the videos that Ellen DeGeneres is putting on Twitter. Not only does she look like complete shit and she's falling apart, but she just has like the creepiest paintings in the background. Like this woman who talks about, you know, being like the happiest TV show host you'll ever meet, literally has the words revenge scribbled on her fucking wall with a Sharpie as her face is beet red. And she rambles on about how bored she is in her multi-million-dollar mansion. I mean, and then, you know, the old, like, conspiracy about, like, celebrities feasting off of, like, synthesized adrenaline that they extract from pineal glands because it gets you super high. And, you know, if there's a will, there's a way. If andrenochrome is a substance that you could get high off of, then people are going to do it. So, it's not the craziest conspiracy, I suppose. I haven't looked into it enough, honestly. I just think the concept is just really funny. That, like, celebrities are just freaking out right now because some people have said Wuhan was actually the center for, like, andrenochrome distribution in the world. And that's why it was specifically targeted. Yeah, that's just really interesting to me. I mean, how is that not, like, at least an interesting, like, sci-fi novel? Yeah, let's see. Tom Hanks, that was weird. I mean, he just got it. He was one of the first people to be diagnosed with coronavirus. And he's one of the most famous people on the face of the planet. Like, what are the odds of that? You know? I just find it so fascinating how so many celebrities are getting coronavirus, like, proportional to the population. That's why some people have coined it, like, coronavirus, as in, like, corona is in crown the elites. It's a virus that, like, specifically targets elite individuals. We're just spitballing right now. You know, there's no bad opinions here. We're just having fun. You know, actually something that isn't a conspiracy about Ellen DeGeneres is how nasty she is off the camera. Like, I am ashamed to admit I actually watched one of those news clip videos on my Snapchat feed, and it let me know. It went into it. Like, there was a quick clip of, like, Cher calling Ellen a bitch. But I can read people really well. That's one talent that I've always had. And without, like, all the glitz and glamour of all the production that Ellen has on her show, and I'm just, like, watching her, like, Twitter videos, I see, like, right through her facade. Even before knowing about, like, all those people that accuse her of being rude. Like, Kathy Griffin was the first person to come out and talk about it in her book. She talked about how rude she was. And then Kathy said that after she released her book, Ellen called her up just, like, swearing a storm, bitching her out for, like, exposing her, basically, for how rude of a person she is. Like, everyone in Hollywood knows this about Ellen. And, like, I never trusted her from the start because I looked into how Ellen got famous to begin with, and her background story is that she would perform comedy at a nightclub, and her comedy was really good, so someone picked her up and gave her a show. So I looked into, like, the video she points to, like, what got her famous. It was terrible. Her stand-up is so bad. Actually, you know, speaking of Ellen, have any of you guys seen that really creepy interview that she had when Sandra Bullock went on her show? And she asked Sandra to share with her any cosmetic tips that she had. And she was, of course, beating around the bush about it. But she eventually admitted that the number one, like, facial technique she uses comes from some like jelly or something that comes from the foreskin of babies after they're circumcised. And she rubs that all over her face. And then I saw this on Reddit, and someone said, yeah, why do you think that the United States is the #1 country that is involved with circumcisions? And the cosmetic industry literally buys the foreskin off of babies that have been circumcised. Like, there's a direct market, and they sell baby foreskin to cosmetic companies. So, like, right from the get-go, we're basically used as, like, livestock. I'm circumcised, so just total transparency, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. I now wish I was not circumcised. If I have kids, I'm not going to do the procedure. I don't even care if it looks weird. You know, that's society's problem. They'll get over the teasing. Go back on my previous comment about how I'm good at reading people. Let's look at Bill Gates' recent CNN interview with Anderson Cooper and how fake this guy is.
Even in those states, the same kind of shutdown needs to occur?
Well, let's say you have 100 cases, and let's say you don't do a shutdown, then it grows 33% per day. So you take 100, you get 1,000, you get 10,000. It's exponential growth.
That little shit-eating half-grin. Like,
oh, shucks, I'm just here to help. What? Let me come in and help. I'm releasing mandatory vaccines. This new technology, RFID, that'll go right into your skin after you're vaccinated, so that way, you know, we're able to track folks. We know which folks have been vaccinated, and then we'll make it mandatory. Like, I don't know, guys, I'm here to help.
Like, ugh. He hates black people more than anyone I've ever met. His eugenicist programs in Africa, look into that. Like, I don't even care if I'm being unfair right now. I know what I sound like. I don't like him. Again, take it with a grain of salt. Trust me, don't trust me. Maybe you still have a piece of your own soul left, your own intuition. Maybe you have this amazing ability to just fucking read people, which we're all innately born with. But somewhere along the way, it just kind of dissipates, and we're no longer able to get in touch with our inner knowing and really get just like good or bad vibes off of people that we see. Yep. I just said vibes. And look, my criticism of Bill Gates just doesn't come from, like, you know, how I feel in my gut. Like, it comes from legitimate criticism of what he's been doing recently. Like, I'm looking at a Forbes article right here that talks about Bill Gates just recently admitted that he wants to literally chip every single person who has received the corona vaccine so that the government can monitor them. Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure out the implications. Let's see, you chip people who have the vaccine, then you make them mandatory, then only certain people who have the chip are able to function in society. Like, that is so blatantly Orwellian. A vaccine that inserts a little chip underneath the skin after you take it. I don't care if you're pro or anti-vax. The majority of people are not going to be for that unless they are in an extremely heightened state of fear. You know, all psychologists will agree that a population under a heightened state of fear is more easy to manipulate. Like, that doesn't even need to be said, yet some people are so thick, you still have to, like, jam that through their skulls. It's not that they don't understand the concept, of course they get the concept. They just don't feel that it's realistic to assume that that sort of tactic will be taking place on a large scale. In other words, they are naive. For whatever reason, they've just lost track of their inner knowing. They know this deep down inside, that during heightened states of fear, they're going to be lulled into what the system deems as protection, but is in reality authoritarianism. They know this. They're able to see this. But something happened along the way where they have lost sight of their critical thinking skills. And they've become super naive and over-trusting. Even if you do think that, like, the United States government is completely benevolent, that would make us the very first government in the history of the world to stay benevolent over a long period of time. If you just look at human history, like Greek city-states, the Roman Empire, all of those governments eventually became like too overbloated, or they did terrible acts against their own populace. There's nothing special about the United States when it comes to that. We're still a government governed by flawed human beings. What's so ironic is I actually preach about stoicism, but then I get like going on my videos and I'm just like, the government though. Actually, one more thing that occurred today that I wanted to talk about. It's the seemingly quite credible sexual allegations against Joe Biden. Now I'm gonna get into it, so if you have any triggers, turn your computer off now. Former Vice President Joe Biden has been accused of sexual assaulting a former staffer in 1993 in his Senate office. Tara Reid, who worked in Biden's office in 1993, accused Biden of touching her, kissing her, and penetrating her with his fingers without consent. Reid made her claims in an interview with Katie Halper, a writer and podcast host, released last Wednesday. We were alone, and it was the strangest thing. There was no, exchange really. He just had me up against the wall, Reid said. His hands were on me and underneath my clothes, and then he went down my skirt and then up inside it, and he penetrated me with his fingers. He was kissing me at the same time, and he was saying something to me. She also told Halper. He got finished doing what he was doing, and I pulled back, and he said, "Come on, man, I heard you liked me." And that phrase stayed with me because I kept thinking what I might have said, and I can't remember exactly if he said, "I thought," or if I heard. It's like he implied that I had done this. Reid said that she told her mother and brother about the assault. She also told a friend who she says advised her not to come forward and face a public firestorm. Her mother, who has since passed, told her to report the incident, but her brother also discouraged her from doing so. The Daily Caller reached out to Biden's campaign about the allegation Wednesday and has received no response. Guys, I'm not shocked, okay? Joe Biden, the infamous kid sniffer, the shoulder rubber of unconsenting females. Yeah, of course he does this stuff behind scenes. I mean, not only is this common sense, but I can bring up another example, Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile is the most prolific child rapist who has arguably ever walked the face of the earth, and he was a British DJ back in the 80s. And he would do borderline creepy things in front of the camera, just like Joe Biden. And then behind cameras, of course, he would do things that were 10 times worse. And that was all brought to light after his death in the mainstream media, and everyone finally understood it was real. So when I see Joe Biden do his creepy gaffes on stage, I think of Jimmy Savile. I'm not theorizing that Joe Biden is as prolific as a pedophile as Jimmy Savile was, but it's definitely something to note and to look at when looking at the psychology behind someone who does creepy things in front of the camera. It's almost like they love the fact that they're getting away with it. All right, so hopefully you kind of enjoyed the off-the-cuff tangents that I had going on today. So in the meantime, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.